In a world that is constantly changing and advancing, we have evolved. Today, we have 50 years of growing closer, of commitment to agriculture, discovering the most specialized needs to provide balanced nutrition, improving crop performance. We have 50 years of innovation, and our new logo reflects our very best. We are untiring searchers, like a sprouting seed deep in the soil, seeking its way upward to the sun. We are global, but act local, providing tailored solutions, enabling us to excel to attain greater efficiency and sustainability. We own the cube, the circle of life, the heart of SQM. The leaf represents our nature because we firmly believe that natural is better. This new image expresses who we are, agronomists at heart, problem solvers achieving effective results. A new image. Above all, we are naturally better. SQM.
La agrícola tiene como nombre La Azteca, tiene una extensión de 240 hectáreas netas de producción. Mi nombre es Edinson Zarango, yo soy asesor técnico independiente. Mi experiencia ya tengo 30 años trabajando en el cultivo de banano. El principal producto que utilizo de SQM en el cultivo de banano es el crop mix. La principal diferencia que yo he notado ha sido básicamente uniformidad en el racimo, formación, peso, vigor de los higos y fuste de la plantación. Ya tenemos prácticamente un año con el programa, todo el 2018. El asesor de SQM es muy importante dentro de nuestro plan nutricional. Tuve la oportunidad de conocer al ingeniero, el asesor de SQM, y le comenté de la importancia de los ensayos que yo tenía implantados, entonces la relación empezó ahí. Prácticamente intercambiamos ideas, analizamos programas, análisis de suelo y siempre estamos en constante comunicación con el asesor. Los productos de SQM los recomiendo porque dan muy buenos resultados y tienen la finca con una productividad rentable para el productor.
Well, a good afternoon to my fellow South Africans and fellows from Mozambique, and also a good morning and a good day to our Latin American friends. And also, I believe we have some listeners from Asia, so good evening to you. We represent a whole lot of different time zones today, with the greatest difference, I think, being 13 hours. My name is Duncan Napier and I work for the SQM office in South Africa. On behalf of SQM and on behalf of Harmony Kunsmis, one of our distribution partners in the Lowveld of South Africa and Mozambique, I would really like to welcome you all and thank you all for signing into this webinar. Today's webinar is titled Balanced Nutrition in Bananas for Optimum Marketable Yield and Return on Investment. We have two presentations lined up pertinent to this topic. Before I introduce the speakers, I would like to thank the SQM marketing team in Chile for their hard work in making this webinar possible. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Guillermo, and the team. If you have any questions during the presentations, please ask them by writing in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. If time permits, these questions will be answered today, and if not today, then each question will be addressed at a later stage. Our first speaker today is Dr. Carlos Gargel. Dr. Gargel was born in Honduras and is of German descent. Perhaps Dr. Gargel, you can switch on your camera now. He has a BSc, a MSc, and a PhD in general agronomy, plant nutrition, and in soil science, respectively. These were read at the University of Louisiana and then the postgraduate studies at the Mississippi State University in the USA. Dr. Gargel has led up many teams, including being Corporative Director of Banana Technical Programs for Chiquita Brands, Soil Management Director of Dole Fresh Fruit Worldwide, Professorship in Soil Science at both the Pan American School of Agriculture of Honduras and the Soil Science University of Bogota in Colombia. Dr. Gargel has been a consultant for bananas in many countries and lists 20 countries on his resume, including Israel, China, Mexico, Ecuador, Sierra Leone, Indonesia, Vietnam, and many others. And he's also been a consultant for various companies such as Yara, SQM, BASF, Albion, Chiquita Brands, Dole, and others. Dr. Gargel has 32 years of working experience in bananas and in other tropical crops, mainly in plant nutrition and soil management. Currently, Dr. Gargel is the CEO of Environmental and Agricultural Technologies in Sigmaringen in Germany and CEO of GEA Investments for sugarcane states in Honduras. So a very accomplished man, and a very warm welcome to you, Dr. Gargel. Our second speaker is Felipe Garziera. Felipe is an agronomist who graduated in the Bahia State University in Brazil, specializing in tropical irrigated fruiticulture. Felipe has 25 years of experience working in plant nutrition and fertigation. His professional activities have been honed in more than 40 countries. His family are also mango and table grape farmers in Brazil, so he has hands-on experience there. Felipe, a colleague, has worked for SQM for 10 years now, 7 years based in Brazil, and currently for the last 3 years, he is the SQM Global Marketing Development Manager based in Belgium. So Felipe, a warm welcome to you too. So without further ado, I hand over to Dr. Gargel for the first presentation. Thank you, Dr. Gargel.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, I believe, in our colleagues, friends from Latin America, Africa, South Africa especially, and Asia. I would like to start by thanking SQM for inviting me to join in this webinar. And of course, the great effort done by SQM, by Dr. Garcia, Duncan, all the team, and of course, Guillermo, Brenda, all the wonderful team that has been able to put this event together. Thank you for all the great effort. The topic of my talk today is trying to share with you in a very short way my experience of 32 years working with bananas in soils, plant nutrition, and all aspects in which we bananeros or banana men are involved. With any further talk, I will pass to the presentation. If we look at the main idea on production, which is yields with good quality, the best quality that we can deliver to the markets, we concentrate on these equation, very general equation that I'm putting to you here, which is the interactions and synergy between a given climate, soils, the nutrition, and of course, all the complex aspects of management. And I'm going to focus on my talk today on nutrition and of course the interactions on soils, climate, and the impact on banana yields and quality. The concept of yields, really, the concept of yield and the objectives of yield are very general throughout the banana world. We aim to have high yields at a very good profit. Now, the concept of quality is very much related to the demands of our market. So to speak, the US market puts a lot of emphasis on how the fruit looks. On the other hand, the European market, Japan, China, the Asian markets, and the Middle East market place very much emphasis on flavor more than looks. And then you have to play with all those components of quality. And needless to say, we all try to aim for that. Now, bananas grow in soils within a given climate, unless you grow them on greenhouses, which is only on very few places in the Canary Islands that I have seen them doing so. And then trying to put in perspective this yield equation, we concentrate on focus on nutrients, and of course our struggle is to overcome nutrient deficiencies. And nutrient deficiencies are a function of either a lack of nutrients in the soil, the wrong kind of fertilizer, or the wrong rates of fertilizers. And of course, the poor management that sometimes we do because we don't know or any other factors. But all these soil properties and climate play a major role on the yields that we have to get to be in a profitable business. And then, of course, you know that we have different kind of soils growing. I have been growing bananas in many soil types, and of course, becomes a challenge. In Latin America, we are still blessed that we can still choose the sites sometimes now where we grow bananas, and we have excellent soils and climates, but then when you go to Africa and Asia, the scenario becomes quite different. And then we have to emphasize on nutrients. If the soil doesn't have it, we have to deliver them. Now, I want to make emphasis on the concept of grown fertilizers. When I refer to grown fertilizers, are those fertilizers that make the conditions of our soil worse. And I would like to think on one fertilizer that we use a lot in the banana business, and that's urea. When we apply urea, we definitely lower the pH of our soils. And if we are in a struggle to raise the pH of our soils from a strongly acid environment to neutrality, and on the other hand, we apply urea, in a matter of weeks, we can drop our pH by 2 or 3 units. And then the whole chemistry of our soil and the whole uptake of nutrients by the banana plant becomes distorted and problematic. So we have to keep that in mind. Sometimes we have to use acidifying fertilizers in scenarios like where we have excess sodium or excess salts or the pH is too high. But then we have to know when to stop, and we only do that through soil analysis. With that being said, the physical properties of our soils many times determine the deficiencies, and I'm going to cite some examples. Phosphorus, for instance, that is being heavily used in South Africa because the soil chemical conditions require so, and also the demands of the crop. And then if you have too high of a pH or too low of a pH for phosphorus, you have to really increase your phosphorus rates. Or in the case of magnesium, for instance, if your soil is too clay or too sandy, you are going to have magnesium deficiencies, and you have to tackle those deficiencies with your fertilizer applications. And of course, the situation becomes complex because there is a synergy, an interaction of physical and chemical properties. And I was referring to the case of acidifying fertilizers, which actually, even though you start with a high pH soil, alkaline soil, and then you have to lower your pH, there is a point in which you have to switch to neutral fertilizers, the ones that are not going to drop or alter the pH of your soil. You want to maintain the pH there. Otherwise, you're going to have all sorts of problems, like if you go to acid and you have been liming, trying to neutralize the aluminum problem, aluminum toxicity damaging your root systems. Of course, you have to, and then you're applying, on the other hand, urea, you're acidifying the soil and reactivating your aluminum. And then we have to be really careful on those points. I said that because the idea here is to give you or to present to you fertilizers that are very high quality and they do not create you any problems in your operations. Now, one point that many times is underlooked by we banana producers is the hidden part of the plant, the banana root system. And if we don't have a healthy root system, the uptake of water and nutrients by our crops are going to be very dismal. And in order to do that, we really need to provide the right environment for the root system, which is the soil, for the roots to grow and the uptake of nutrients. And we have to keep that in mind. In my opinion, you might not agree with my opinion, but in my opinion, on the fertility puzzle, I divided in three pieces: the physical fertility of the soil, the chemical fertility of the soil, and the microbiological fertility of the soil. And then if one of these three components fails or is not its optimum, is going to affect the other two. And we have to keep that, of course, in mind. Now, in a couple of chapters that I wrote for a book on banana root systems, which is a book there published by SEAT about 10 years ago, we really are lacking enough in our understanding of some aspects of the soil chemistry and the nutrition of the plant. If you look on the left of this table, you can see that, according to my opinion, we have a very satisfactory level of understanding on the dynamics of nitrogen, magnesium, copper, zinc, boron, sodium being essential but yet negative in excess, and soluble salts. These are very straightforward. The dynamics of these components are very straightforward. However, when we come to the level of understanding of pH and its interaction with banana plants, we run into a series of complexities. For instance, the use of urea, which will lower in a matter of weeks your pH, is going to alter the whole physiology of the plant and the whole system of uptaking of nutrients, and of course the biology, microbiology of your soil, to say at least. Also, the kinds and contents of organic matter. I was reading, and I know that farmers in South Africa use a lot of organic amendments, and for a good reason. Their soils require soap, and they're having good benefits not only on the physical, improving the physical properties of the soils, but also the nutritional value of the soil, and of course the nutrition of the plant. Potassium is a major challenge of understanding, because the dynamics of potassium in the soil, on the three phases, on the soil minerals, on the soil solution, and the plant uptake, but also because all the sources of potassium fertilizers that we have. In general, we tend to use a lot of potassium chloride in banana systems, and in semi-arid or arid environments, the excess of chlorine, if we don't have the ability to leach our soils and wash them off of chlorine, we're going to have chlorine problems. Phosphorus is a major challenge also, because the knowledge of the chemical behavior of phosphorus in our soils is not quite well understood at the farmer's level. So we need to transfer this knowledge and technology to the farmers. The fact that we lime, and I have been liming bananas all my life, under the wrong concept sometimes that bananas do not respond to liming, which is the wrong concept, because we usually use the wrong liming material, either the wrong poor quality or because we miss on the rates that have to be applied. Aluminum is a major problem, mainly on acid soils on the humid tropics that we grow bananas. And I will quote some examples: Ecuador, Africa, mainly Ivory Coast that I have worked with, Asia, for instance, Vietnam, Indonesia, some places in the Philippines as well. Iron and manganese becomes complex because we assume that whatever values we are receiving from our soil testing, all those nutrients reported there are available to the plant, and that's not correct. But by a general rule of thumb, only 10% of what is reported there is available for plant uptake. The rest is in some other forms that are not available for the plant. And of course, the chemistry of the soil, like cation exchange capacity, which actually is the capability of the soil to retain and give up nutrients for the soil solution and plant uptake, is very complex and depends on the pH, the kind of clay minerals that we have, and soil moisture. So we need to keep that in focus, because that what makes our predictions and programs somehow complex. Now, as I mentioned, soil factors that really affect the nutrition of our plants are restricted soil effective depth. The shallower the soil, the more in problems we are. Extreme soil textures, here to clay to sandy. Poor internal soil drainage. Drainage is a problem even in arid regions. Water tables could be there and we just don't even know about it. Soil compaction inherited from previous land uses. When I joined the banana world some 32 years ago, I was still young, nobody tilled banana lands. That concept of tilling banana soils came out of Australia and actually South Africa. And nowadays, we don't plant any banana land without doing deep ripping, improving soil internal drainage, getting rid of plow pans, soil cementation, soil compactions that have been for ages previously limiting our yields. So that's good. And of course, the climatic and topographic factors like high water tables, frequent water logging. Actually, I'm here in the banana region of Honduras trying to rehabilitate drainage systems and soils after the floodings of 2 hurricanes that we had less than 3 months ago in the country. We need to move our nutrients from the soil components, clays and humic substances, mainly fulvic acids, to the soil solution, then make a passage to the banana root systems, and then to the bunch. This is what we harvest and that we commercialize. Now, if we have any barriers to block the passage of nutrients in these 3 components, that's where we have the challenges. Here is where a high quality fertilizer pays off, or where a poor kind of fertilizer is going to block our effort or to diminish our effort to get the high yields and good quality we're seeking. Now, the barriers for nutrient uptake, if we look at the physical component of soils, of course, I already mentioned them. And on the chemical side, I think that Duncan was mentioning in his introduction, is that one of the aims of this webinar is to make clear that banana nutrition, banana fertility is not only to put fertilizers there, it's to keep the right balance, the right equilibrium, the right synergy between nutrients. And it's very important to notice the relationship there is between calcium and magnesium, magnesium and potassium, iron and manganese, phosphorus and zinc, sulfur and nitrogen and zinc is a very complex situation that we need to really keep in mind. And of course, we have to deal with common deficiencies, the main one being nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, and so on this list. However, even though zinc, boron, iron are considered to be minor elements, the only thing about minor is the quantity that is required to correct a deficiency. But as far as the impact of the deficiency in yields is tremendous, is as bad as a deficiency with nitrogen, magnesium, or potassium or phosphorus. So let's be clear about that. If we are aiming for higher yields, we need to make sure that the plant is well fed with 17 essential nutrients now. 16, but one is making its way to be essential, which is silica. So let's keep that in mind, because that's very important. If we keep just fertilizer with nitrogen and potassium, we are not going to get any further where we are right now. And our markets and the economy is even more demanding for higher yields and higher efficiency. And even markets, even internal markets, domestic markets like here in Latin America are more demanding quality now at a lower prices, of course, because the competition is very fierce. So let's keep that in mind. Let's keep that in focus, because otherwise the business is not going to progress in the benefit of the producers. Now, very important for us is to keep in mind what are the optimal levels of nutrients that we need to keep in our crop, bananas specifically. You might see some other sources of data here, but this is the nutrient levels that I have been developing for the last 32 years. Let me tell you that I'm not old. I'm an antiquity more than an old person. So when I joined the banana world, most of the banana world was only applying nitrogen. It was a novelty. It was a novelty to apply potassium, not to mention phosphorus or magnesium, and so on and so forth. But now we realize that if we don't supply the plant with the whole spectrum of nutrients needed, we are not going to get any further from say 20 metric tons of bananas per hectare. And we need to be right on the 80, 90 metric tons of bananas per hectare. That's where we need to be competitive and successful in that ever demanding and increasing demanding market. So let me mention nitrogen. Might seem awfully high for some of you, but for the very, very high yields, and for high yields, I'm talking about 90 to 100 metric tons per hectare, you need to have 3.5, above 3.5 nitrogen, above 4 potassium, and potassium is very important because potassium is the stress reliever per excellence on banana plants or in any superior plant by that token. Same as phosphorus, same as magnesium, same as sulfur, and so on and so forth. If you really want to get rid of your quality problems like curved fruit, small fingers, thin fingers, choking of the banana throat or rosetting, you need to really aim to your boron and zinc. And we see that over and over again. Now, I'm sharing with you some data from Mrs. Floria Verge from Costa Rica, published data on what amounts of fertilizers we need to produce 100 metric tons of bananas per hectare. I'm talking about 260 nitrogen, 36 phosphorus. However, these levels will depend on your soil chemical properties. Phosphorus can go as high as 70, even sometimes even 100 kilos per hectare, depending on the fixing property, phosphorus fixing properties of your soils. Potassium usually is very high. Minimum you need to apply 450 kilos. And if your soils fix potassium, like the ones in La Guajira, Colombia, and some places in Africa, you have to go sometimes as high as 900 kilos per hectare of potassium. And this is not copper. If I apply 100 kilos of copper, the plants are going to die. It's a typo error. It's calcium. You need to supply calcium mainly in acid soils, and magnesium, of course. Now, optimal levels in soils, and there is here a debate ever going. Which one is correct, the soil testing or the leaf testing or both? I go with both. To me, to have an ideal condition, you have to have good nutrient contents in your soils and also in your plant. If the nutrients don't make it to the plant, they don't make it anywhere. They don't help you. So I'm sharing with you here the minimal critical levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and so on, and the range of rates that I usually use or that we usually have throughout the scenarios in which I have been working all these years. And it will surprise you to see the huge amount of potassium and of course of nitrogen. But you have to consider that many of these data comes from areas that we still stick in using urea and potassium chloride. We need to move away from those fertilizers that, even though they are cheap and they have been successful to a given point, are creating us problems. And I'm going to illustrate right now why. Data from Dr. Machner, from Dr. Barber, the authorities in plant nutrition, clearly indicate that when we achieve optimal levels in the plant, the efficiency of using nitrogen by the plant is very, very high at its optimum. Therefore, we can lower our nitrogen rates. And I have been able to do so in experimental plots to lower my nitrogen rates without detriment to my yields as low as 50%, even with increasing yields, maintaining my 4.2% potassium in the plant. However, in commercial farms, commercial scenarios, I don't reach that much because so many things can go wrong. So the lower that I go with nitrogen with optimum potassium levels is 35%. And that's a lot of money. And that's a lot of problems being solved. And on the top of that, I have made the switch many years ago to go with fertilizer sources like potassium nitrate that Dr. Garcia is going to talk to you about in the next conference. So now, to me, one of the best practices is, for instance, not substitute. We are not substituting anything. The best thing in the armory right now, you want to keep your pH of the soil correct, the chemistry of your soil well balanced. Mainly, you have been struggling for that. Is to move to a molecule like potassium nitrate, right? And move away from urea and move away from potassium chloride as much as you can, as much as your pocket allows you. But pocket or economy is a very, very relative matter, because if you are getting higher yields and higher quality, and that's an exponential economic gain, higher quality fertilizers really pay off. Now, just to summarize my presentation, in my concept, to do a good fertilization of bananas, you need to really keep in mind and keep into your equation your plant requirements. And requirements of the different varieties, they vary very little. For instance, Williams versus Grand 9 or versus Valerie, they vary very little. Usually, what makes you put more or less fertilizer are your plant populations. Like in South Africa, you usually use 2,000 plants. Here in Central South America, we use 1,600 mats per hectare. In Asia, you go between 1,600 to sometimes 2,000. It depends on the scheme that you use for planting, double row, single row, traditional planting schemes. So you need to keep in mind your soil capability to supply nutrients, climate, rainfall, temperature, evapotranspiration, relative humidity, sunlight, maximum and minimum temperatures, very important in South Africa, Israel, India, sometimes here in Northern Central America and Mexico, that we have to deal with low temperatures, sometimes lower than 14 degrees Celsius. Management, varieties, plant populations, very important, as I mentioned, and cultural practices. And of course, complete, thorough, equilibrated, balanced out fertilization, in my opinion, is the key for higher yields and top quality bananas. Thank you very much, and I will entertain questions when the time comes. Thank you again. You can go on.
Felipe, would you like to carry on? Are you there? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Duncan. Thank you, Carlos. It's always good listening you with all the experience that you have. Well, good afternoon for the ones that are in Europe, in Africa. Good evening for the ones in Asia, and good morning for the ones in the Americas. I'm very happy to be here today. I would like to thank our colleagues in South Africa, Duncan, Etienne, and also Emmanuel, to support this idea and make this webinar happen. I would like to talk with you this afternoon for us. Now, about our experience now, about the SQM's experience in bananas in some different countries. In Ecuador, that's the main banana exporter in the world, and also in Mexico, and also some experience we have in South Africa, where we apply some of these concepts that Dr. Gauchel just explained to us. So it will be a kind of a practical experience that I will share with you. All this experience and this data that I will show to you now are present on this booklet we call Banana Booklet, that was prepared by SQM, by our marketing team in Chile. And all the references and data and details are on this booklet that at the end of the presentation I will let you know from where you can download it, but you can also ask for any of our agronomists independent of the country that you are. But here you will find all the details, and I will do just a summary to you today showing the main results. First, I would like to start in explaining exactly as Dr. Gauchel mentioned. We saw that potassium and nitrogen are the two elements most required by the banana. So then from the nutritional management point of view, when you think in supply potassium to our banana plant, what is the best or the most efficient source of potassium that we can use? And if you look from the chemical point of view, now we can see that independent if it's potassium nitrate, potassium sulfate, or chloride, potassium is always present in the chemical form of potassium oxide, expressed as potassium oxide, or just potassium as K. So the chemical formula don't change for potassium. That means that the main difference between the potassium sources, if we compare these three sources, it's about the counter ion. It's the ion that comes together with the potassium. So if you use potassium nitrate, together with potassium, we will be applying nitrate nitrogen. Potassium sulfate, we will be applying sulfur, and potassium chloride, we will be applying chloride together. So the point here, from the nutritional management point of view, it's be sure and also consider this counter ion in order to avoid excess in our nutrient solution in soil. If you have elements in excess in the nutrient solution, we will increase salinity, we will increase the EC, and all the negative effects that will come from it. So I can see quite often in the field that many farmers, consider the main nutrients like potassium or nitrogen or phosphorus, but they does not consider the counter ion that come together with the element. So one of the secrets or one of the tips to be successful on the nutrient management, it's also consider the effect of the counter ion in your nutrient solution. As well, other difference when we compare the potassium sources, we will be linked to the nitrogen source. As we saw, if you use potassium nitrate together with potassium, we will be applying nitrate nitrogen. And normally with the other sources, potassium sulfate or potassium chloride, that as they does not supply nitrogen, other source of nitrogen need to be applied together with. And then normally these sources are urea or UAN, ammonium sulfate, or these sources that mainly are ammoniacal nitrogen. And here we have a difference. Both are nitrogen, but from the chemical point of view, you can see that nitrate, it's a nitrogen form with negative charge. And ammonium, it's a nitrogen form with a positive charge. So one is a cation with positive charge and an anion with negative charge. And this, from the perspective of synergies and antagonism between the elements, as Dr. Gauchel just mentioned on his presentation, made all the difference as we will see at the end of this presentation. So taking these concepts into account, let's start with our first trial that was conducted in Mexico by one of our colleagues, Modesto Mojena from Mexico in 2015. That was what was evaluated. It was evaluated different rates of potassium. If you look to the potassium rates, the treatments here on the left column is expressed as K2O, and here in the dark gray expressed as K. So the amount of K per hectare, potassium per hectare, now we start at 0 and then 291, 374, 457, 540, and 623 kilos of potassium SK per hectare. So these are the different treatments, different potassium dose rates. Nitrogen, as we can see, all the same amount of nitrogen, 400 units of nitrogen. Phosphorus, SP as well, expressed in SP 44, P2O5 100, same in all treatments. And then if you look to that, we will see that the difference here, beside the amount of potassium that are the main treatments, is also the amount of chloride applied. Remember what we mentioned about the counter ion? From all this amount of potassium, the sources are 50% crop KS, that is our potassium nitrate, and potassium chloride. So the total amount of potassium was used in two sources, 50% potassium nitrate, 50% potassium chloride. As we can see here, if you look to this on this column, the amount of chloride applied increased as well, accordingly increased the amount of potassium chloride that was applied. And the second difference is from the total amount of nitrogen that all treatments contains 400 units, we can see how much is in nitrate form and how much it's in ammoniacal form and in urea form. So we can see that as well between the treatments, as we increase the amount of potassium applied with potassium nitrate and potassium chloride, we increase as well the amount of nitrate nitrogen in comparison with the other forms. If you look to the treatment 6, we will see that almost 50% of nitrogen is in nitrate form. And for the other treatments, we can see that they are decreasing in more ammoniacal form. So these are the difference between the programs. And what the results will come. When you look to the results, okay, we will see that for the highest dosage, with 623 kilograms per hectare of potassium SK, or 750 expressed as K2O, that was the rate that gave us the highest quality with the highest yield in Mexico. We can see about the finger length, 9 centimeters, that was the highest finger length at this potassium dose rate. Now, the number of hands per bunch as well, you can see that we come from 5.6 till 7.2, with statistical significant difference between all the treatments. The number of fingers per bunch as well, with statistically relevant, the numbers, and of course the total bunch weight. We can see as well with the statistical significance difference that we have the highest bunch weight with that amount of potassium applied. That is exactly in line with what Dr. Galhau just presented to us. Another parameters from this result, if you look to the total yield on this result, we can see that again, the treatment with the highest amount of potassium applied, we have the highest yield, 65 metric tons per hectare. So we comes from 47, 51, 55, 56, and 65. That's really significant, different. So the relative yield, if you compare it to the control, that was 0, it was an increase in 39%. But we can see in comparison with the other treatments as well, that we have the difference. And the boxes per bunch. So the conversion for each bunch harvested, how many banana boxes I can fill it in Mexico. And again, we can see an increase on 80% if you compare it to the control treatment, but as well a significant increase in comparison with the other treatments. Another trial that we conducted was this one in Ecuador. It was about the effect of potassium source in yield. And then we also find on this trial an effect on the black sigatoka resistance of the plant. A trial conducted at the Quevedo University in Ecuador in 2017. The treatments on this study, it was a comparison between potassium nitrate and potassium chloride. Amount of nitrogen applied was the same, 351 units with KCl, 350, same 1 kilo difference. Again, the difference here, as we can see, when you use potassium chloride as potassium source, from the total amount of nitrogen, 50% was in nitrate form and 50% in ammoniacal form. When you use potassium nitrate as potassium source, the amount of nitrogen in the fertilization scheme in the nutrient solution increased to 74%, and with 26 with ammonium nitrate. Amount of potassium applied was the same in both, 576, 574. In the treatments, that is equal 478 expressed as K, as potassium. This is expressed as K2O. And the difference we can see, obviously, as we mentioned here, about the counterion, as you mentioned. In the treatment used with potassium chloride, together with potassium, was supplied 432 kilograms of chloride. If you look to this number, this is higher than the amount of nitrogen applied, if you look to that. So that's the reason why you need to take into consideration as well the counterion when we are applying, especially the potassium sources. And zero chloride when you use potassium nitrate. So we can see the amount of nitrogen, amount of potassium are the same. The difference is linked with the amount of nitrate to ammonium ratio, and on this case, the amount of chloride in the nutrient solution. And then we come to the results. Now the comparison, if you look to in all the parameters, weight bunch, now we can see really an increase of 20% in the weight bunch. Number of boxes per bunch, that's as well an increase on 33%. Total developed leaves, as well, 12% increase in the total developed leaves. And the remaining leaves at harvest time, so 6.1, 7.5, that means a 23% increase on the remaining leaves at harvest time. Here is the point where we noted the effect on the black sigatoka resistance, because you noted that at the end, at the harvest time, plants that was treated with potassium nitrate having lower leaf losses due to the attack of black sigatoka. Black sigatoka was there, of course, obviously, but the plant have lower leaf losses in the treatment with potassium nitrate in comparison with the potassium chloride. And so we have a highest number of remaining leaves at harvest. And as well, we note a difference on the pseudostem circumference at 6% larger in comparison between the treatments. This is a comparison between potassium nitrate and potassium chloride. Another trial done on the next year in 2018, conducted as well in Ecuador and the Technical University of Machala. That's a comparison between the K-source effect on the banana yield parameters. And this study, it's really a comparison between the three potassium sources, potassium nitrate, sulfate, and chloride. We can see nitrogen, same amount of nitrogen applied in all treatments. Again, the difference, it's about the nitrogen form. We can see that from 400 units, when you use potassium nitrate as potassium source, here we have 50% of the total nitrogen as nitrate. And in the other treatments between ammonium and urea, that compounds 100% of the nitrogen in nutrient solution with zero nitrate. DAB, phosphorus, same amount, 44 kilograms of phosphorus expressed as P, or 100, that's P2O5, and same amount of potassium, 700 units expressed as K2O, or 581 expressed as K, as potassium. Again, the difference, counterion. When you look to the program, same amount of nutrients applied, but if potassium sulfate used as potassium source, applied as well. This amount of sulfur, 252, and with KCl, 548 units of chloride. Again, if you see this, we are applying more chloride than nitrogen, if you do the comparison. And the result of this trial, of this comparison between these three potassium sources, if you look to the weight bunch in a comparison between potassium sulfate and potassium nitrate, we can see an increase in 21% in favor of potassium nitrate when you go to weight bunch, and an increase in 11% in a comparison between potassium nitrate with potassium chloride. The number of boxes per bunches, the conversion of bunches into packaged box. Now we can see an increase in 21% in a comparison between potassium nitrate and sulfate, and an increase in 15% when the comparison is with potassium chloride. And again, the pseudo-stem circumference, an increase in 8% between potassium sulfate and 6% when the comparison is done with potassium chloride. So we can see the improving many different yield parameters, as you mentioned. Now, a trial conducted on last year. It's our brand new trial conducted in South Africa, followed by Duncan, that is our moderator today in South Africa, with other partners in South Africa as well. And this is the trial design. Again, a comparison between the three potassium sources, potassium nitrate, sulfate, and chloride. This is the dosage, the rate applied of the commercial products per hectare, and this is the amount of nutrients applied. In all treatments was applied 700 units of potassium, expressed as K, potassium, 300 units of nitrogen, so same amount of potassium, same amount of nitrogen, same amount of phosphorus as well. And again, the difference we will see on the nitrate to ammonium ratio. We can see that from that 300 units, 90% it's with nitrate form and 10% in ammoniacal form. And in the other treatments, it's 50-50 rate, 50% nitrate, 50% ammonium. So the difference is about the nitrogen form. And again, about the counter ion, as you mentioned, in the total amount of sulfur applied when we use potassium sulfate, and in the total amount of chloride applied when we use potassium chloride as the potassium source. So this is the treatments and the trial design. And this was the result achieved. Now, if you look at the comparison between the K sources, the average between the three, okay, we will see that between potassium nitrate, sulfate, and chloride, the highest bunch weight was achieved with potassium nitrate, as the highest number of hands per bunch as well, the highest hand weight, the total hand weight, obviously, then it's also higher. The number of fingers per hand, it's also higher. Now the finger length, the length of the banana as well, and the finger girth was the highest one. And on this trial, we have the highest dosage and lowest dosage. If you do this comparison between the highest dosage and the lowest dosage, as we can see here, for example, between nitrogen rate, comparison between apply 200 units of nitrogen or 300 units of nitrogen, we can see that in all these parameters, with 300 units, we have the best result, as well with the comparison between the potassium rate. The lowest rate of potassium in comparison to the highest rate of potassium, that we have the best result with the highest rate of potassium as well. Now, the economics, if you do the analysis, the comparison between these three treatments, to doing the economics, taking the average of the total hand weight, the number of bunches per hectare, that of course was the same because the number of plants per hectare was the same in all. That gives to us the average yield in metric tons per hectare. We convert this average yield in boxes of 18 kilograms per hectare, so that will bring to us this amount of boxes per hectare. Same price for all boxes. Then we have the total income minus the fertilization cost, assuming that all the other costs are the same. So the only cost that really gets some variation, it was the fertilization cost. We have the net benefit, so the net result. The interesting thing here is, of course, obviously, we know that potassium chloride is the less expensive source. Then we move to potassium sulfate, and then we move to potassium nitrate. As you can see here, according to the price, potassium nitrate costs almost more than the double with potassium chloride, as we can see. But doing all the synergistic effects, as we are discussing previously on the presentation of Dr. Gahel, and showing all these results to you, we can see that it's not really a cost, this is an investment, because we needed to invest at the beginning of the season to get a better result at the end of the season. And another trial conducted as well in South Africa by our team, it's the effect of the nitrate to ammonium ratio in the nutrient solution, with this study specifically on the resilience of the plants growing under saline conditions. That was the study. It was evaluated the effect of the potassium, the nitrate to ammonium ratio in banana plants growing under saline conditions. So this was the treatment, the standard. When we have the comparison between the 3 potassium sources, now with same amount of nutrients applied, and then again, the difference will be the nitrate to ammonium ratio. When you use potassium nitrate, 67% from the total nitrogen was in nitrate form and 33% in ammoniacal form. And in the other treatments, it was exactly the opposite, 33 as nitrate and 67 as ammonium. Also, again, the difference in the nutrient solutions, it was linked with the counter ion. If you look to the total sulfur content, it was with potassium sulfate 3.8 times higher in comparison with the nutrient solution with potassium nitrate, and potassium chloride 2.3 times higher in comparison with potassium nitrate. And of course, with potassium chloride, it was 15% higher when you use potassium chloride. And why? Because we add intentionally, as the idea of this trial, it was evaluate the crop performance under saline conditions. It was intentionally added in the nutrient solution sodium chloride, 2 grams per liter. That really brings the salinity to the nutrient solution, and then we will be able to evaluate the plants or the plant development growing under saline conditions. And that was the result when you look at the comparison between the 3 potassium sources. For the plant fresh weight, we can see that the highest fresh weight achieved with potassium nitrate. The number of primary roots in the plant developed as well, higher number of primary roots, and the plant height, of course, as well, obviously, the highest with potassium nitrate again. So then we should clearly show that for the best potassium source and nitrogen source for plants growing under saline conditions, you can use with potassium nitrate, and that will increase the amount of nitrogen in the nutrient solution. So all these positive effects that I showed to you now, we can be explained with this animation. From we can see the concept of antagonism and synergism. Antagonism, that means ammonium with positive charge has an antagonistic relationship with all the other elements with positive charge: calcium, magnesium, potassium, iron, copper, and all the others. So that means plant cannot uptake 2 elements with positive charge together. Plant needs to take the balance, uptake 1 element with positive charge and 1 with a negative charge. And that is synergism that we can see with nitrate. So when plant is growing in a nutrient solution with higher concentrations of nitrate, we are also increasing the plant uptake of calcium, magnesium, potassium, and all the other elements that have positive charges. As well, we can explain this one and the good result in the plants growing under saline conditions with this animation, because when we increase nitrate that has a negative charge, nitrate have an antagonistic relationship with elements with also negative charge, as chloride. So when we are growing under saline conditions where this salinity is caused by chloride, increase our nutrient solution in nitrate. It's one of the ways that we can avoid the uptake of the chloride by the plant. And so that's brings us to the conclusion that for sure when we see all these results, potassium nitrate, it's really one of the, and especially for banana, that it's a crop that requires huge amount of potassium. It's the best source that brings to the farmer the best economic result. At the end, this is what really matters. So all this content I show you briefly. So then you can, if you get access to this booklet it's available to download on the SQM website. If you want to enter on the SQM website, www.sqmnutrition.com, then you have there SQM Academy. Inside SQM Academy, you have books. So if you click there, you can do the download of this banana booklet, and then you have access to the full details and scientific references and so on. Or as well, you can just ask for one of our agronomists in your country. Our agronomists have it, and they can send it to you as well. And slides here.
Hi, Felipe, are you finished?
And that's it. That's my presentation. Thank you to all of you guys. Hi, Duncan. I miss you.
I think Felipe and Dr. Gargle, if you can put your microphones and pictures on, and we can go through a couple of the questions that have cropped up. The first one from Peter Berger, and that's for you, Dr. Gargle, is you mentioned acidity and urea, and he asked the question, is that the same with ammonium sulfate?
Yes, it is. Actually, with ammonium sulfate, it's even stronger per kilo, if we want to talk it that way. But we recommend ammonium sulfate in several scenarios. One is where you have a sulfur deficiency, that you need to tackle both nitrogen and sulfur. But then once you tackle your sulfur deficiency, which actually a requirement of sulfur in bananas is about 20 kilos per hectare, but the deficiency can be damaging. So you complement it with potassium nitrate. That is the answer. So you tackle your deficiency, say you can apply your sulfur source, and then you complement that, or you complement your nitrogen with the sulfur source. And the other is where we have sodic soils, that you need to have, actually in sodic soils, the pH of your soils are going to be 8.2, 8.3. So you need to lower that pH anyway. And then you need to complex the sodium with a sulfur source to form sodium sulfate and be able to wash off that sodium from your soil profile, from your root system. Those are the only two cases in which I recommend sulfur-based fertilizer, to tackle the sulfur deficiency, but then that's a very small amount. And then to get rid of your sodium problems. And once you get your soil, or you have sodium or salts at the pH of 6, 5, 7, of course, you switch to say potassium nitrate. Sure.
The second question is also from Peter, who noticed that your copper was 100 kilos per hectare, but you did explain that copper was a typing error. It should be calcium. So Peter, don't stress too much about that toxicity.
I kill all the wildlife in South Africa if I apply that much copper. That's for sure. That's a type error. Sure. Yeah, sure. Let's make sure we change it, because if that presentation goes around the world, I'm going to kill a lot of wildlife.
Exactly.
Including banana. Sure.
Okay, there's a question from Nicholas Palatoy. I'm not sure how you pronounce that surname. And it's very specific. It's how much phosphorus should you apply in a loamy acid soils in Ecuador? Now, that's a pretty difficult question, not knowing perhaps the location, but give it your best shot.
Okay, yeah, well, I know where he's talking about. If it's about bananas, it's in the Quevedo area, which are very strongly acid soils. To be able to tackle the phosphorus deficiency, which is not easy, but you have to consider that those soils have a huge amount of aluminum and iron oxides that fix a lot of phosphorus. Actually, you're going to start to have a clear response to edaphic phosphorus application on the third year. So the rates at the beginning are quite high, say 50, 60 kilos of P per hectare. But then after the third year, you can lower that comfortably to 25, 30 kilos of phosphorus per hectare. That's probably either if it is bananas, it's in the Quevedo, between Quevedo and Santo Domingo de los Colorados, and if it is plantains, it's going to be in the Amazon basin. So either way, it's the same problem. So, but those are the rates, sure.
Okay. There's a question from Jovan Erasmus, who asks, if you're applying a lot of K as recommended, how much K will remain for the following season?
As for me or for Felipe? As for me?
I think you can answer that, Dr. Gogol.
Well, from my perspective, actually, it will remain quite a lot because now the question is how much of that which is remaining will be available. Actually, if it remains, very little is going to be available. Remember that by a general rule of thumb, only 10% of which is reported on the soil analysis is available now. It depends on the mineralogy of your soils, and I give you some examples. Like in the data I have seen from South Africa, clay soils from your black clays near the Mozambique border, where you have your vertisoils swelling and cracking black clays. You can have a lot of potassium there remaining from whatever you applied, but very little is going to be available for next year. Now, if you go like in a scenario like in some places of the Philippines or in the Guajira, Magdalena departments of Colombia, where you have a mineral called albite or potassium feldspar, that elite that fixes a lot of potassium, very little is going to remain. It's going to be fixed by the soil. But then if you do the conventional soil analysis, unless you do soluble potassium in water that you extract by ammonium acetate, for instance, it's going to give you a lot of potassium, but none is going to be available.
Okay, that's clear. One for you, Felipe. Peter Berger asks, does continuous fertigation by drip irrigation make a difference in the amount of fertilizer applied and the yield?
Yes, make a difference in efficiency. I can give you some practical example that I conducted in Brazil. When you do continuous fertigation, we can even, for example, well, as Dr. Gahel mentioned, you can decrease the amount of nutrient supply in 15, 20% without any kind of losses in the yield, keeping the same yield. So then do the higher efficiency. So that's something that's perfectly possible to do. But needed to be really continuous application, because someone do fertigation like once a week or once each 10 days, then will not work. Really needed to be continuous.
Thank you. Pravin Thakur asks about the trial in Mexico. He would like the soil types for this experiment. Is that perhaps in the banana booklet?
I think yes, and also give me the chance to talk about this, Duncan. For all of you attendees, if you look to the right side of your screen, if you click on files, the banana booklet, it's available to download now from that. So, for example, the marketing team just reminded us here. So if you go to on the right side of your screen, where you have your chat box, if you look, you have one of the topics is files. If you click there, then you can download the banana booklet immediately from there, and then you can check it.
Great. I think one for either of you, perhaps Dr. Gogol, what would be the ideal leaf area index for getting higher yield and increasing weight of a bunch? And that's from Ganinath Dawali.
Okay, great. Great question. I did all the calculations about a month ago, but I don't have the figure in my old, already lithified rock-like head. But of course, we're going to have the emails of all our colleagues, and I will send you the paper that I just wrote about that. And I think you're going to be very interested on what calculations I came with. And of course, I'll send it to you through Duncan here. Promise. And please, Duncan, don't be bashful about pressing me for the paper. I'll send it.
Sure.
Thank you. That's a very important question. Sure.
Pravin Thakur again asks, how would it be more useful he says, hi, it would be more useful if you could mention the climate, tropical, subtropical, with soil types of these regions. And I think he's referring again to the trials in the banana booklet. So I think, it would be nice if you could read that perhaps. And if you have questions after having read it, then we can answer that more specifically. And that's come to the end of, hang on, let me see. Okay, there's a Dr. Power who asks, is foliar spray beneficial in banana, Dr. Gargle?
Yes, indeed. It depends on the nutrient and what mixture and what kind of fertilizer you you put into your mixture. Yes, indeed. Actually, we practice that a lot with very good success. And it depends. Well, let me say, I'm going to make it short, but it's a quite complex question. First of all, you cannot put the whole nutrient requirement of bananas through foliar applications, not at all. I mean, you can only tackle for certain periods on the development of the plant, for certain parts of the phenological period where there is a very high demand of the nutrient. We have been very successful on applying magnesium, getting rid of magnesium deficiencies, potassium reinforcements on a given point in time where potassium is badly needed in a matter of days. And also zinc, boron, iron, and manganese, mainly minor elements. And of course, here in America, we have the advantage that we have to spray a lot against black sigatoka. So we can apply that in the black sigatoka mixture without any problem. Now, the molecules of fertilizers, you cannot apply salts in you can, but it is going to take you forever to get rid of deficiency or tackle your needs. Actually, chelated fertilizers are the best source for foliar applications, but don't try to apply phosphorus, not avail, calcium, not avail, but try potassium, magnesium, boron, zinc, iron, manganese, and actually we got rid of problems with quality like twisted short fruit, twisted actually rosetting in plants by boron and magnesium and zinc, deficiencies. Of course, copper, which of course don't apply 100 kilos of copper, not ever. I mean, only 2 kilos. That's going to chase me at night like a nightmare. That I'm going to send you a presentation to distribute it through our attendees, please correct it. Of course, copper very, very little, and of course, our most of the molecules for fungicides have copper in it, so we don't need to apply copper because the fungicides have it. Good.
Is there perhaps a reference or two on foliar nutrition in bananas that you could let me have later that I could send out?
Sure, certainly. I will put you in contact with the Albion folks, which actually are very much the leading team on working on that.
Okay, thank you.
I'll send you as much literature as you want. Sure.
That's the end of the questions. I would just then like to thank you two speakers very much. It was really excellent, and I would really like to thank all the attendees and also for the positive comments that we've received on the chat. So thank you all, and that's the end. Be in touch with me or with the SQM team in your country if you need any further information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye. Signing off.